Hi everybody, welcome back to Cognitive Dissidents. I am your host for this evening, Parallel Mike, and I'm joined by my co-host,
Monica Perez of the Monica Perez Show.
And Hoodaway from Geopolitics and Empire.
Thank you, my friends, for joining us once more. Tonight, we've got a lot to talk about. As always, it's been another crazy month. So much has been happening that I didn't know where to start, but I thought, let's just go with the biggest story in the world, I would say, which is the trade war, which has led to a huge economic fallout, not as much as most people would have expected just yet. And that's because the US is out in front in terms of inventories. So I just wanted to begin this one with a little article that I've got just to lay out for listeners where we are with the trade war. And then I'm really interested to get both of your thoughts on this one. So let's just share the screen. So it's the first boats carrying Chinese goods with 145% tariffs are arriving in LA and shipments are cut in half. Expect shortages soon, which I thought was an interesting one. It's CNN, and they're actually advertising now that shortages are coming in the US. So what happened was the business leaders were basically front-running potential tariffs, so they got huge inventories, and they're about to run out, and we're finally getting to the point now where the shortages are going to happen. And it says in here, in fact, I'll just read you a little bit. It says this week, this is for the LA port. It says that they're down in terms of shipping by 35% compared to the same time last year. And the cargo ships coming in are the first ones to be attached with tariffs, which were levied against China. And it's currently, I think I've already said, 145%. It says the drop-off in imports from China on the boats now coming in into port is more than 50%. And many importers have cancelled previous orders because US businesses aren't interested in paying the steep tariffs. So the warning right now that there's going to be shortages in the US, and this has really just been a saga and full of lies, full of disinformation. Scott Bessent is totally not credible. He said that China's coming to the table to do a deal again and again, and China keeps saying, no, we're not. I think they've finally managed to get something in Switzerland where they're going to meet. But I really want to get your guys' opinions on this. I know you're in there in the US, Monica, so you might have a more succinct take on it, but I'll hand it over to you. What do you think about the tariffs, and where do you think we're going with them?
I have a few different things, specific and also kind of bigger picture. One really, really big picture thing that is a pattern that I see a lot, and I think it does apply to the ports. It could apply to the ports. The ports were in the news during COVID because there were supply chain issues. You had labor problems. They had ships stacked up, 80 ships stacked up, nothing moving. Afterwards, they implemented some labor deals, a lot of strikes in the news across industries across the world. And I guess my idea is that this is happening in the energy sector, it's happening in air travel, and we'll just use the ports as an example. I think they want to basically usher in the technocracy. They want everything to be automated. They want everything to be easily controlled from the top, no watchers, no people. So in this case, you could say, all right, you have a labor shortage and it's stacking up of the ships from a couple of years ago. They have to succumb to a labor deal that maybe is a little bit expensive. Then, so they give you a lot of that will also give an excuse to kind of implement some automation to relieve the pressure on labor. And then when you take the demand away, you can say, hey, well, we implemented this automation stuff. The labor's very expensive. They're the only variable costs. We can take the labor away, fully implement the automation, and then perhaps trade will resume normally. I don't know. I think there are many levels of agendas here on the tariffs, if you want to respond to that, but then I'll have a few more things to say.
Yeah, you just reminded me of one thing, Monica, when you mentioned that, is that there was the huge strikes at all of the ports as well. So if they want to break the strikers, they could take it to automation and just, get rid of a lot of them. I know the LA port, I think it accounts for something like 30% of all US imports from China. So it's a huge part. And there was huge strikes there over the last year. So that could be a key part of it. But I would say, I think personally, this is controlled demolition to take America to what Doug Casey calls the Great Air Depression. And I think that's where we're going. I think we're going to see that, and they're going to get rid of a lot of people from these positions and then use that as the springboard to technocracy. It's the only way to do it. But Haroy, how are you thinking about this? You are Mr. Technocracy.
Yeah, I had a few things to share here real quick. Let's see. All right. I think you guys nailed it. For me, it's 2 points, which you guys alluded to already. So Michael O'Fallon, by the way, I saw you had also a Michael O'Fallon tab open, Mike from Sovereign Nations.
Oh, it's the same one. Yeah, you can do it. Go for it.
Okay. Yeah, you can add any further thoughts here. I think he nails it. And we've, this roundtable was born out of us, questioning Trump's assassination thing. And then Trump is basically ushering in the new world order. It's a huge psyop. And here are O'Fallon lists the goals of the Great Reset and basically how the Trump administration is implementing them, but with a cover. So it's kind of like They Live. You have the glasses on, and when you have them off, you see like Trump is doing amazing things, but then when you put them on, it's like, oh, he's implementing the Great Reset. And he talks about, like you said, Mike, fracturing the current world order, creating a reset of our free market economy into a stakeholder model, and then ending U.S. dollar hegemony, creating the conditions for the rise of China and BRICS. And as you already mentioned, Monica, bringing in automation. Lutnick has talked about that. So just AI, software running things, humanoid robots. I think Hyundai just bought a whole bunch of humanoid robots for their factories, drones, all these sorts of things to automate whatever they can, take the human element out of it. They'll probably at some point add UBI or something for the people who are out of work, create smart cities, right? And destroy the unipolar world dominated by the US, create a multipolar world. And then I had another point. So I think that's basically it to bring the technate in, to lower America down a notch, because we've talked about this. Jeff Sachs, I had some clips on that. I've been talking about him a lot. He's calling for world government. And the multipolar world is the new world order, and it's the regions. So you can't have US is like a few notches above everyone else. And so we got to have even Stephen. And Archbishop Vigano came out. This is fascinating. I mean, I really like the fact someone of his stature says these things. And he says China deal is essential to globalist plans for a new world order. And he says, if you scroll down, I've got it highlighted in his publication. He says, China aims to carve out a central role for itself in the new world order, and it is the techno-capitalist oligarchy that intends to dictate its structure and rules, as has already happened. I love his phrase, the psycho-pandemic fraud since 2019. China is indispensable for its collaboration in the process of the synergization of the global market, which implies the use of geoengineering, interventions in food, synthetic meat, GMO foods, privatization of resources, imposition of social credits, digital currency. And so the globalist elite, in short, considers China as a laboratory in which the communist totalitarian regime makes possible by force what Western democracies cannot achieve without systematically violating constitutions and laws. Without China, there is no globalization, no financialization, no digitalization. Without China, it's not possible to achieve that great reset based on the dismantling of the power of the Christian West through programmed deindustrialization. And so I think that's pretty much what I got there.
Jump in, Monica.
I have a couple more items, but in responding to that, what you just read, I would also say that's Elon Musk and Trump are ushering in the techno-capitalist oligarchy and the globalization, financialization. So there is definitely that global, in the true sense of the word, like universal push to all of those things. But then there are some things to drill down on. I think another big picture thing is tariffs can be used if you really are. I just really can't stop feeling like there's a lot of things being put in place to prepare us for a real hot war in the Middle East if it comes to that. I'm not saying it's definite, but tariffs can lead to autarky if you looked at specific things that they were trying to accomplish. I also think that if you have that kind of autarky feeling and a real hot war, you're going to have continentalism. So our strife with Canada and Mexico is, I think, just for show. I mean, the head of the central bank of the UK is now running Canada. That definitely part of the globalist cabal. And if it comes to it, if they have an excuse like war, then they can usher in that North American Union in name or de facto. So that's a big picture thing. But I also think that these tariffs, it's a mistake not to think of the venal, like the greed and corruption that some of these policies are there to exploit, and specific things that they do. So two examples are, one, just a funny one, and I thought of Herboye, and I tweeted, I think, at you, saying we need better psyops, because in the morning, was it yesterday, the day before, in the morning, all I heard on the news, Fox News I was listening to, is Trump wants to tariff films. 100% tariffs or whatever on foreign films. Then the afternoon, I was listening to Fox, and it said, the reason films are filmed abroad is that other countries give tax credits. And then in the evening, I saw a New York Times headline that says, Governor Newsom wants to work with Trump on $7.5 billion worth of tax credits for Hollywood. I'm like, they didn't make you even digest it overnight. Trump says this thing, and all of a sudden we're subsidizing $7.5 billion in Hollywood. I mean, the last industry on earth I would want to give a break to is the propaganda coming out of Hollywood. But the last thing I'll say, and this is going to segue into a different topic here, is J.D. Vance was in India recently, like April 23rd, and he gave this speech. And in the speech, he talks about the trade he wanted to do, the trade agreements and the actual alliances, specific things he wanted India and us to have a relationship over. And it reminded me a lot of the prank call those Russian pranksters made to Lindsey Graham. I don't know if you guys remember this. They pretended they were the Turkish foreign ministry. And he kept saying, look, you've got to not do the S-400. You're going to have sanctions. That was a missile defense system they bought from Russia, that in the U.S., you are not allowed, you have to have sanctions against a country that has that system. He said, we have to get you back on the F-35 program. Just get your F-35s. Like, we're going to, partner in making parts and all of that. And J.D. Vance is talking about the F-35. India, you've got to get involved in the F-35 program. Obviously, he's pushing the financial benefit to the defense industry. But weirdly, that day or the day before, so Vance visited the Pope like hours before he died. When he arrived in India on April 22nd, there was a big attack in a tourist community or a tourist area where a lot of people died. They blamed it on Pakistan, and he commented on it. And lo and behold, yesterday, or maybe it was yesterday, India attacks Pakistan, kind of heating up that antagonism. And what would be a better psyop for encouraging defense alliance between, or at least an F-35 deal between India and the U.S. So I think these tariffs have global agenda, but also little corruptions that could mean billions of dollars to actual individuals or companies.
Yeah, I think you touched on many of the important subjects we're going to get into. One thing that I think is important to recognize is that these tariffs are absolutely going to crush Main Street, which is crazy. The power of propaganda that they're telling people that this is for Main Street, when the largest corporations will be eating up market share when all of these small and medium-sized businesses just collapse, because there's no way they will remain competitive if you take out the US's biggest importer in China. That's where all of the manufacturing goods come from. All of the supply chains go through China, and their profit margins are like 2-3% on most of the things in these tiny shops. Whereas Amazon, you can send anything back to Amazon. It doesn't touch them because they've got government contracts, and they can just reroute via Vietnam or just get exemptions, which is what Trump's done for big pharma, big tech, and the military industrial complex. So again, it's like COVID Mark II, right? Where they crushed the little guy and they say, oh, it's for your benefit. We're going to save you from the mad virus. This time we're saving America. But actually, it's going to destroy Main Street. And I think this could be the death knell. I think it will be far worse than what happened in 2020 to 2022. So, and farmers as well. Farmers are already saying, listen, if we can't sell our goods, I mean, China were a huge importer of US agriculture products, and Donald Trump and his team say, well, just sell it in America. Wow, well, that's nice and easy, right? Just sell it in America. So simple. But yeah, it doesn't work like that. So that's the other thing I think we need to maybe just touch on for a second is, if that's not the real narrative, if that narrative isn't valid, what is the real reason for this? Is it to crush the small businesses? Is it to make way for the technocracy? Is that what we're going with?
Yeah, I want to comment with Peter Schiff, but just something I'm thinking about lately. Like, I just paid my monthly internet bill before jumping on this call, and it's 800 pesos. That's like $40. They just raised the price. Like, they didn't even tell us. Like, when I first started, it was 600 pesos or something, $30. And then every few months, it just goes up and up and up. And I'm like, what's going on? And it just goes to speak to this neo-feudalism. In my weekly analysis, I talked about, like, in Croatia now, and I watched a 30-minute segment from Croatian News where they're talking about how you got a couple, a man and woman, married, whatever, both working full-time, both have excellent jobs, according to Croatian society. And the average salary is like 1,500 euros a month. And they cannot afford homes. The homes are crap quality, flats or houses, even an hour outside of the capital, Zagreb. And they cannot afford it. So, like, they're doing everything they're supposed to. So whether it's housing, salaries, just utilities that are going up, plus, now the inflation for goods that we're going to have to experience. And I want to share real quick Peter Schiff's stuff. And he says here, our Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, is a very smart man. He's not the blubbering idiot shown in this clip. The reason he can't answer the simple question, who pays tariffs, is because he knows the answer. He's stammering because he's struggling to formulate a BS explanation.
Who pays tariffs, Mr. Secretary? No. Answer the questions I asked, please. I only have 5 minutes. Who pays tariffs?
Sorry. Well,
who pays tariffs?
Sorry,
Mr. Secretary, please.
Excuse me.
The question is very simply, who pays tariffs, Mr. Chairman? I'd like him to answer that question.
Well,
he wants to answer other questions.
Well, Congressman, if the exporters, they dislike tariffs so much, why wouldn't they? If I think what you're trying to get me to say.
Did you remember the question? I'm not sure you did. Who pays tariffs?
It's a very complicated question.
Who pays?
Well, here's the answer. We do, right? and there was another tweet from Peter Shaw. I just thought I should there. So I thought it was funny. He says, I keep hearing that China is our enemy. Those bastards have been bombing us with consumer electronics, furniture, appliances, bedding, lighting, toys, sports equipment, clothing, footwear, auto parts, jewelry, beauty products, stationery, pet supplies, etc. It's been brutal. And then, if you guys have any further thoughts on that, and I was going to mention.
Well, one of my thoughts is that Scott Bessent is one of the worst people to represent tariffs. He's terrible. He's a terrible public speaker. He stammers. He always comes across as smug. I think he's trying to exude confidence, but he just has a smugness about him. And he reminds me of Herman Munster. Maybe that's giving away my age a little bit, but he does. And just one more thing that you said, Aray, you was talking about your internet bill. I don't know if you saw the article from Matt Smith on Doug Casey's crisis investing, but he was showing what a civil engineer got paid back in 1910 in gold ounces. So he did the sums on what they was being paid and did all of the conversion, and they was being paid 150 ounces of gold per year. In 2025, it is 18.7 ounces of gold per year. And I would urge listeners to do the sums themselves. Find out what you was being paid back in the 70s if you was around, in the 80s. Look at what you paid for your house and then see what it would get you today in gold ounces. And it really does just expose how poor we're all getting and how degraded the system's got. So I think this reset that we're getting towards, and that these tariffs are going to be ushering in, I think they realize that the jig's up almost, and they're going to have to they need that next system in place because people are not going to be able to survive. Yeah, people are going to be desperate. And that's the perfect opportunity to bring in UBI, CBDCs, digital IDs, real ID, as you call it in the US. And I think that's what this is about. It's about just getting people to the point where they're so desperate they accept it all.
Just real quick, Monica, just on that article that was posted was mind-blowing, and he was referencing a book, which I'll have to read. But in the comment section was also equally as valuable. So one of the subscribers to Matt's and Doug's, I think it's both of theirs, right? Substack. He was talking about these civil engineers in Panama, like a century ago. And one of his subscribers commented and said, I'm also an engineer, and that in the 90s, like 1990, he was making, I think, a third of what those engineers were making a century ago. And that in the 1990s, making a third, he was still able on that salary in the 1990s to buy a house, a car, and do okay. And he says, now you're getting paid a third of what you were getting in the 90s, something like that. And now you can't, it's impossible. So that clearly shows the degradation from a century ago to the 1990s and 30 years later to today. And you see it everywhere. Like the utilities, like the wages are stuck. They've got it down. They're not going to let the wages go up, and they're pushing everything else up. And that's that neo-feudalism. It's insane.
But this is the thing, right? That's completely true. Back in 1970 in the UK, you could buy a house for 3 times the average salary. Today, it's about 10 times the average salary, and it requires 2 people to go to work, and they're going to be crippled with debt for 30, 40 years. And the energy, I'm not even going to get into it because we can talk all day about the price increases. The energy price increases are wild across the West. But one thing I wanted to mention was the only reason that we're all surviving is the cheap crap coming from China. And now that's what they're taking away from us. So you take away the cheap crap, and then you've got more money chasing far fewer goods. That's really high inflation while salaries are collapsing. So I think it's going to be an inflationary depression. Somebody said it really well the other day, and then I'll hand it to you, Monica. They said, the price of the stuff that you own is going to collapse, and the price of the stuff you need is going to skyrocket. And I think that's a good way of framing what's coming.
I always like to think of this is the puzzle that I've had about this. Tariffs, historically, and it's not really the free trade era came in probably a little bit of a psyop to make, and I always espoused free trade as a libertarian. Like, you absolutely want people to produce at their comparative advantage. It maximizes utility globally. I can understand. I've read John Coleman, the Committee of 300. He has a lot on immigration and on tariffs, and he was a protectionist when it came to industry. And when you think about what tariffs were good for, if I recall correctly, it's to protect an industry, grow an industry internally, and protect it from foreign competition. And you would do that because you want to get you want to foster an industry that has high productivity of labor, which will get you actually more wealth per capita, is one reason you would do that. So we are a 71% of the people working in this country are in service industries. That was something that was the actual target, if I recall, and this is just out of memory, of Bill Clinton when he signed NAFTA. He said, we want the entire United States to be a service industry. The reason being, or the ostensible reason, that you make more that way. So for us, and it's a big export of ours, like film and entertainment is a big export of the United States. So to disrupt that balance of trade, I'm not saying we run a trade surplus, we don't, but if you are trying to foster industries that have extremely low productivity of labor and sacrifice ones that have high productivity of labor, that makes no sense, and it's definitely going to contribute to the impoverishment of the average worker, consistent with all the other things that you're saying.
Well, can you imagine what something's going to cost if it's got to be produced in the US? I mean, the Chinese work 80, 90 hours a week for about $2 an hour and no health and safety. I mean, you go to those factories, there's people missing fingers, missing hands. It's just not going to happen. It's impossible. So, we've got to dispel that narrative as propaganda, and that leaves the door open to, well, what is this all about? And I can't see any good good reasons for this besides collapsing world trade, which is precisely what they did in the 1930s, right? On the build-up to World War II, we had the collapse of the bubble, the Dow Jones Industrial Average, and that was followed by the Smoot-Hawley tariffs, which collapsed world trade. And the imports to the US fell by 60%, which is precisely what the LA portmaster is saying is going to be 60% less imports. So the parallels to that period of history are very strong right now.
And think of what happened. You get GATT, you get the World Trade Organization. I actually did write a little something about they have been talking about a new trade regime, international trade regime. So what do you do? First, you collapse it, and that would also be a stepping stone to a really formal world government.
Hey, Thomas Massey just back to pull out of the WTO.
Well, that's going to play into the hands of having a new thing.
Just had a few quick thoughts. We were talking about tariffs, and Mike Adams, Health Ranger. I take what he says with a grain of salt, as I do a lot of these alt media personas. But he made an interesting comment about the tariffs, because he talked about how Trump came out and the U.S. said they're gonna, no one can buy oil from Iran. I don't know if it was just oil or just any goods, and China gets a lot of its oil from Iran. So he says, like, if anyone buys from Iran, they're going to be completely sanctioned. So it's kind of like between the lines to China, right? Cutting off their oil. And he mentioned the Pearl Harbor situation, right? Day of Deceit, the book, and when I studied in Geneva, our professor said there were like 8 steps that the U.S. did to choke Japan off. One of the biggest ones was oil, but there were other steps. I forget some of them, but basically they painted Japan in a corner intentionally. And in some of their secret dispatches, the U.S., I don't know, it was the Department of Defense or whatever, they were saying they wanted Japan to strike U.S. first, to use that as a pretext to then begin hostilities. And so now you have the U.S. Saying you can't buy Iranian oil. And then, I mean, it's China's much bigger in this sense compared to Japan in the 1940s. But it's almost like we could see that scenario. Like maybe they want to choke China off to get them to fire the first shot and say, "Aha! Look, it's the classic false flag attack." Okay, now we got to start attack with China.
Well, they could want them, I guess, to have just massive instability internally. I think their youth unemployment in the 16 to 25 category, they stopped releasing data about 2 years ago, so nobody knows, but it was around 20%, and some people estimate it's now at 30%. And I guess maybe the plan is to get them to strike Taiwan. I mean, if you have the youngest generation are the ones that are most likely to revolt, and if they've got no work and they're feeling disillusioned, and China's got a collapsing property bubble, which has been going on for 2 years, Evergrande and Country Garden, it's about $1 trillion black hole they've got because of that. So, yeah, maybe the US knows it's going to collapse, but it's going to try and collapse Europe and China faster than it's going to collapse, and that's the name of the game.
It seems like, I had on Gregory Copley. I'm going to get him back on again. He published a new book. I really like his stuff, and he said it's the race to the bottom, but to be the last man, because things are collapsing. You want to sort of be the last one to collapse. But I'm just from reading the Western propaganda media, I'm getting these signals where it seems like the Pentagon is goading, like it wants Xi Jinping to try and take Taiwan, and that Pentagon has some scenario there that's going to work to the advantage of the U.S. And they've always done it. Like they told Saddam's like, "Hey guys, can I take Kuwait?" And they're like, "Yeah, go ahead, sure." And as soon as he does, Bush is like, "Oh, look, he took Kuwait. We got to go get Saddam." It's always that same shtick. But you had a book up, Monica?
Oh, my father. So there's a book called Backdoor to War. This is Roosevelt's Road to Russia, but it looks just like this. It was in a pile. One of my sisters put it in a pile of trash after my father died, but it was a book, Backdoor to War. And it was how they provoked Japan, because Roosevelt just could not get the consent to go to war. And my father actually, he was underage, but he basically snuck into the Navy in 1944. I was the youngest of 9. He was very old when I was born, but he came back from the Pacific and in the 50s. He read that book, and I have the copy of it, and it has all this marginalia, and he was completely disillusioned after that and absolutely thought the whole thing was a setup. And he said it was absolutely an act of war to cut off their, to blockade them when they were at war. It was an act of war, and needed to be retaliated against.
I've got something that I'm going to share. This is another one that I found really interesting, and it was the retirement of Warren Buffett,
Yes.
94 years old. But you know what was really fascinating about this for me was not that he was retiring. I mean, geez, he's 94. He needs to step aside. When you hear him speak now, you're like, you should have retired some time ago, Warren. But what really fascinated me about it was that actually he ended his career by saying that the US dollar is effectively about to collapse. And what a thing for him to say, because all of his career he's basically said, he's been a cheerleader for the US. He's enriched himself off of the US Ponzi scheme. The dollar is what made him rich. The debasement of the dollar and being connected politically allowed him to invest in all of these companies. So I'll just share this one. Hopefully listeners will be able to kind of bear through his voice, because it is a little bit it's a little bit impossible to listen to him for too long. But I'll just play this.
Owning anything that we thought was in a currency that was really going to help. And that's the big thing we worry about with the United States currency. I mean, the tendency of a government to want to debase its currency over time is, there's no system that beats that. You can pick dictators, you can pick representatives, you can do anything. But the people, there will be a push toward weaker currencies. And of course, that is, I mentioned very briefly in the annual report, that fiscal policy is what scares me in the United States, because it's made the way it is, and all the motivations are to doing a lot of things that can cause trouble with money. But that's not limited to the United States. It's all over the world, and some places it gets out of control regularly. As I know, they devalue at rates that are breathtaking, and that's continued. I mean, people can study economics, and
Okay, I'll just pause there. But what's really funny is he spent his career as well basically saying that gold was dumb, it was a pet rock, and now he's talking about the devaluation of the dollar. And of course, gold's at record all-time highs. It's going up 3% a day. I think it's 3,400 right now, and that's because of the devaluation of the currencies. So it was interesting that he chose to end his career on that. It's a bit of a end of an era moment, having Buffett leave. But what's your guys' take on that? Did you find it significant, or is it just, nothing important for you?
I mean, probably. I mean, it's that trajectory that we've been on, and it goes to what you said earlier. I think I was Porter Stansberry. I saw him. A lot of people quote tweet and saying, looking at the default, I think there were less purchases of treasuries or something like that. I don't know. Fed is doing a form of QE recently, and it's kind of like we're reaching that moment, I think. And part of what we're talking about, the inflation, is evidence of that. And that's how they, I think, reset currencies. Like you think of Mexico in the 90s with the peso. And I think we're reaching that currency reset. And then that's what they're doing with the CBDC stuff to bring that in, the digital dollar. Some people have talked about like China has a two-tier yuan, one for domestic and one for external. So that way foreigners can't meddle with its currency. And so maybe that's what they're going to do with the US. But essentially it's going to bring in the social credit system. Jeff Sachs just said in 10 years that SWIFT is going to be obsolete, and it's going to be CBDCs will kill the dollar. And just real quick, I just want to share, I was going to mention this earlier, just on what I was saying earlier about the inflation. And I just came across this guy's, Charlie Morgan. He's got a huge YouTube account, but he's some businessman. He's worth tens of millions of dollars. His video went viral on how he left Dubai. He didn't like it. But I was looking at some of his stuff. What's one thing people can do is we have to find a way to make more money than we are now. And starting businesses or whatever, thinking outside the box. And something that I think he's well-meaning, and he's one of these guys that's better. There's a lot of these types of accounts that tell you about business, and he just seems earnest, down to earth. And something he was talking about in terms of making a business that I liked. We go to school. We're trained to not copy and just do everything by the book. And I think that's one of the things that screws us up the most in life. This whole no, I gotta do I gotta go to university. I gotta do a 9 to 5. I gotta be an employee. I gotta do things by the book. And I'm like, no, I'm learning now the first time I'm working for myself, doing my podcast. And you got to keep thinking hard how to survive and do different things. And I look at most, not everyone, but a lot of people around you they just do the 9 to 5. They don't want to think for themselves. And so that's, I think, one solution for people is we gotta get scrambling, work together, figure out ways to beat the inflation. And I was just going to comment on one thing you said before about the offshoring Clinton 90s. I think it was all strategic. It's sold as, it was just to make money, just the corporate elites. And I'm like, no, again, think about the big picture, reverse engineer, Kissinger and Nixon in the 70s, opening up China. The goal is world government. Let's reverse engineer. They built the technocracy laboratory in China. And it's the offshoring was strategic because the goal is convergence between East and West for one world government. And so I think the elites said, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to offshore to China the manufacturing, so that way we intertwine East and West so they can't break off. And they're symbiote this. It's like the Borg, it's simulation. And so now they're stuck together. And they're not going forward, there's going to be no way to extricate themselves. So we're going to have this world state. And it's like Pan Am of Hunger Games, the Hunger Game 15-minute city districts, where each district only manufactures one specialty. And so it's no, you can't manufacture. China's the manufacturing hub. And I was having my listener off the record call last night. We were talking about this. Someone from Australia was saying for tractors, they used to be able to have these repair and get the parts locally in Australia. They can't anymore. You have to get it from China. So it's you're going to be at the whim of, you can't do anything yourself anymore. You got to wait. If you're a good boy, you can get it from China. If you have low social credit, you're not a good boy. Sorry, you're screwed. So
that's such a great, I hadn't thought of it that way. I used to think of the analogy of what was happening when they wanted to converge East and West, and some quotes I had heard from Rockefeller and stuff was that I thought of it as a transmission. So when you have to have the engine and the wheels going kind of close to the same speed in order to have them join up. So they were slowing down the West and they were speeding up the East. But the way you're talking about it, I think maybe a better analogy is like a clock. Every single gear has to be in place for the thing to work. And that's actually, you can't undo that easily. So I actually have some skepticism as to how much of this tariff stuff is really going to stick. I feel like a lot of it is psyop-y, but I wanted to comment a little bit on the, so that maybe it'll go away after they have a new trade deal and you'll have absolutely unfettered trade, but you'll have these little defense deals on the side, whatever, I don't know. But a couple of things on the Buffett, it is absolutely galling that he suggests that he thinks or ever thought it was a bad thing to debase a currency when I like to tell people this because I don't think they understand. You learn about Keynes and Keynesianism in school, and he talks about sticky wages, and that's why you have to have a loose currency. That's why you have to have a little bit of inflation. What people don't understand is what that means is, hey, if you want to lower wages and absorb all the productivity increase from your people, you have to debase the currency because they're not going to take $8 when they're making 10. But if you inflate the currency by 25%, they're making 10, but it's the equivalent of 8. And who gets the benefit from that? It's the holder of the assets before that inflation starts. And that's how it kind of pushes up from labor to, and that's why you have no productivity gains. If you look at the 19th century versus the 20th century, there were the wages kept pace with productivity gains. And you could see it because they didn't debase the currency. And I also want to say, as far as inflation makes interest rates go up, nominal interest rates go up. We have an increasing debt, an incredibly increasing debt. It's, I think, everything in the country is $40 trillion in public debt, but the federal debt is almost all of that. It increases every year, regardless of Trump's big, beautiful bill, of DOGE, of whatever. And I started to just look into it. If I could take 1 minute to just say, our budget is like 90% welfare and warfare. So it's almost all Medicare, Social Security. The defense is like $1.3 trillion. It's probably 0.3 trillion to have legitimate defense. It's more than the rest of the world combined. It's not legitimate. It's a wealth transfer. So you can fiddle around with all this administrative cost savings and you're really not going to get anywhere. However, you might save enough over time. There are no cost savings right now baked in, but I think there might be as they automate all of these government systems. They're not going to reduce the size of government, but they have to free up some money because that interest bill is just going to continue to skyrocket. I agree. We're going to be at a point where there has to be like an actual paradigm shift. You're never repaying this within the system, the confines of the system. And as it reaches the tipping point, you're going to have a new dollar. It's going to probably be a CBDC. I hate to think that it's scary and dramatic, but I don't see how you sustain a $40 trillion or 35 or whatever $trillion debt at 6-7% or anything historically normal as far as an interest rate goes.
Yeah, I think we're in that paradigm shift now. I think it's happened. If you look at what the pillars of the post-World War II system was, it was world trade, globalization. It was the US dollar as the trusted safe haven global reserve. And it was the US being a trusted steward of the waterways. And every single one of those pillars has collapsed. World trade's collapsing due to the tariffs and the bifurcation of East and West, which listen, the US cannot fully decouple from China. But what it can do is have a bifurcation where they make an agreement. And I think that's what's happening. But that means that the rest of the world is caught in between this. And that's why I think we'll go next with the blackouts. I'd love to get your opinions on that.
Yes.
Before we get there, I just wanted to finish on what we were talking about real quick. And just to mention India, Pakistan. No?
Yes.
Earlier. And just on convergence, I shared this recently because this is related to convergence, but in the Eurasia zone. This article just came out and said European leaders talk of EU army, and it's like that is the plan. And what I got a tweet that went viral thanks to Brent Johnson, right?
Oh, cool.
So he shared this, and it got like 12,000 now views. Wow. And I was looking at this recently, so I was checking a quote. Adrian Hilton in this book called The Principality and Power of Europe. Britain and the emerging Holy European Empire. And it's Jean Monnet, one of the globalist founders. And in the book, he says, one of the founding fathers of the EU, Jean Monnet, also a devout Roman Catholic, totally rejected the idea that Europe should consist of sovereign nations. He believed in the Catholic vision that Europe should become a federal superstate into which all ancient nations would be fused. Fused is the word he used in a communication dated the 30th of April, 1952. For this to be achieved without the peoples of Europe realizing what was happening, the plan was to be accomplished in successive steps. Each was to be disguised as having an economic purpose, think about like tariffs, but all taken together would inevitably and irreversibly lead to federation. You think about Jeff Sachs, who came out recently and said, we need a world government. And that, what did he say? That the idea, I think he spoke about the EU, and that was actually a Catholic idea. So I think the Vatican, since the 1800s, you had the Concert of Europe. Mark Mazauer, I have his book called Governing the World, which is a good read. He said the 1815 Concert of Europe, which failed, was the first attempt at European integration. And I think the Catholic Church, the Vatican Church, or for you Catholics out there, the evil strain. What does Vigano call it? The deep church. That they were core behind European integration and world government. So again, when people say it's the Jews, it's like, well, the Vatican faction is huge in world government, and so is the Zionist faction. So, how could it be if the Jews, if the Vatican centuries ago was working on world government? So, and it's both of them. So it's like they're both working to. And you've got the British elite. But before getting on to India, just any thought on this?
Oh yeah, I want to express thought on that. I totally agree. I just used that example yesterday. If Italy invaded the Vatican, we would not send, and we should not send help. Like, we should not be involved with those countries. But yes, I agree that the Vatican has got tentacles everywhere. I believe this Catholic integralism is what they call it here, is a complete setup psyop. It is not a Catholic thing. Real Catholics, I do not think, would approve of that. You could do it in a country that is Catholic, but you can't do it in countries that are not Catholic. So I'm just saying you could have a confessional state, old Spain, the Philippines, whatever. But see, that thing leads with Jean Monnet was a devout Catholic. He was not a devout Catholic. He ran off with some 22-year-old who was married. So he may have been born Catholic, but to represent that kind of stuff as consistent with Catholic doctrine and dogma is not good. The people are different from the Vatican. So there's a lot of dark stuff. I think the Pope drank baby's blood. I totally do. But I think that, like, J.D. Vance converted to Catholicism. A lot of people, Tony Blair, Candace Owen, I think there's something up with trying to hijack the hierarchical nature of Catholicism for political purposes. And I want to separate from the idea that it's consistent with Catholic doctrine. It's really just consistent with the political Vatican stuff, which doesn't care about that, I think.
Yeah. Well, I live in one of the most Catholic countries in the world. Like, there's churches. The churches are full. Like, I couldn't believe it. Yeah, that's
probably Catholic integralism wouldn't be anathema, but you can't do it.
Yeah. But the cultures of Europe, like anyone who's spent any time living in Europe, the cultures are so vastly different.
Yeah.
And the people and the attitudes to life, and it would never work. So it's a dumb idea. And especially not with all of the Muslim immigrants that Europe houses. Can you imagine trying to enact a plan based around Catholicism? But I did just have a guy on my podcast. It's not been released yet. And he's an Eastern Orthodox priest. And he said there's quite a lot of Catholics now switching over to Eastern Orthodox.
Definitely, because they can't stand what's happening in the church.
Exactly. And of course, for listeners that don't know, the Catholic Church, and look, one day I'm going to ask you about this in an interview, Monica. Well, you'll have to come back on my show. But the idea of palpable infallibility, like that to me is immediately, I could not be a Catholic because of palpable infallibility. That's nuts, especially if you look at the last Pope. So I don't know how
it's
Catholics
only in matters of faith and morals. It hasn't been used in many years. The idea is that if Christ gave the church to Peter and said, what you bind on heaven is bound, if you bind on earth is bound in heaven, so that there is no dispute about very specific moral issues. He has to speak ex cathedra. He can't just say, like, blue is the nicest color, and that's infallible. It's right. I'm not defending it. I'm just clarifying. It's a very narrow thing.
It is a narrow thing, but then you think, so you've got this guy who's doing all these terrible things, and he's like, and then he's all of a sudden got this divine thing. But that's not where we're going to go. We are going to speak about the Pope, though.
Hey, man, that tweet started with a devout Catholic, which is untrue, which means to me that it was meant to cause problems. And that's why I don't like that Catholic integralism stuff. It's meant to cause problems in the U.S. Obviously, they're going to try to make it cause problems in the EU. The Sharia law, I have the Fabianism and the Islamic thing. They want to synthesize the secular and the religious, use Muslims to do that there too, and hijack that sort of paternalistic hierarchical stuff. These are all stepping stones to totalitarianism, in my opinion. World totalitarianism, where even just like the mask ritual during COVID, to me, was foreshadowing of like a secular moral rituals that will be part of what, if this thing gets big enough, if the world government gets big enough, so that it is truly totalitarian. You have to have those things that, you're an insider or an outsider. You have to have outward signs. You have to wear a veil or a mask or whatever. These are the elements of religion, and maybe that's what they're going to use to keep 7 billion people in line.
I think. Sorry, Hurray, I was just going to pass it over to you to discuss. I know you wanted to bring up the old Donald Trump as Pope, and
yes, perfect.
But just before we did that, I wanted to add to what you was just saying. Like the last Pope, one thing that the last Pope made me think is it seems to me like the vehicle for that secular one world type religion merging is going to be Catholicism, but also inherent within that there is this discrediting of Catholicism.
Yeah, then you get to destroy it.
Exactly.
Instead of being the only hope, that's truly satanic. Yeah, really.
Yeah, and also I think the demoralization of Catholics because because of things
they
like
leave.
fallibility, you've got to you sat there watching this guy invite transvestites to the Vatican and basically make a mockery of Scripture, and it's a case of how does that how do you deal with that as a Catholic? You either leave or you have to.
I consider going ortho, but that's being hijacked too.
Well, the one thing about Christianity that I think is very useful is there is no I am the number one pope and I get to make the decision.
There's no way around this shit getting hijacked. No,
but one part of that, of course, is the demoralization and almost, I would say, the mockery of Catholicism. And then what did we see? We saw Donald Trump and the White House specifically tweet out this image of him dressed as the Pope. Now, I don't think we'd have seen that for any other religion. I don't think Donald Trump will do that for anything to do with Judaism or Islam, but he certainly did it for Catholicism. So I'm just going to pass that back to you, Roy. Do you have the image with you?
Yeah, well, hold on.
Was you offended by it, Monica, because you're a Catholic?
Oh, no. The only thing I thought was I live in LA, so I was like, can you believe Trump did that? I'm like, Trump doesn't even have a computer. Like, he has nothing to do with that stuff. Like, he allows whatever. He is fully, he's an employee of some entity. He doesn't have a lot of control over what they do. I'm sure he doesn't care, but no, I laugh. Besides, the Pope is not divine. You can make fun of him. You can't make fun of Jesus or God or the Holy Spirit, but that's it.
I was just looking for a quote, but I just on the thing, because I'm like a non-denominational Christian, but I guess I'm Reformed Protestant, whatever. And regarding Catholics and Orthodox, all these people going into Orthodoxy, and there's a really great comment I found from this guy called Lucas Curcio, who says, the fruit of many people who converted to Rome and Eastern Orthodoxy has resulted in them being angry and arguing all day with Protestants online, not an actual love for God and neighbor and holiness of heart. Stay Protestant, my friend. And I just felt like that's so true. A lot of these people that I'm seeing convert to Orthodoxy, like I'm trying to be peaceable with most people and not argue and, and I see these guys, they convert to Orthodox and they're just arguing and you guys are wrong and I'm right. And it's kind of like they're doing it in the flesh. It's like they're not talking about sin and repentance and hell. It's like, no, Orthodoxy is right. You're wrong. You suck. You're stupid. I'm like, what is this?
Immigrating to a foreign country and you would both know this, and I know it from my ancestors, it takes decades to understand a culture, and religion is like that too. So if you convert, you can't. I mean, I took a long break, but I was raised on Catholicism, for 16 years at my father's knee. Like, I know a lot of the nuances. I know how your attitude's supposed to be. It really is ingrained in you. It would be, I think it's rather arrogant to fight like that, and it betrays a lack of understanding of the true nature of the doctrine to they just don't get it. It's just not in their souls. There's like Opus Dei, I don't like it because they have a lot of, seems to me, there's pride and materialism. It's like undermining of the actual, that's why I always think, oh my gosh, I have to tell you this funny thing. I said to an interior designer I know, I said, I'm Catholic. I'm just not good at that stuff. I don't know how to dress, because I'm really not supposed to look at that stuff, not supposed to be vain. So, you'll see Catholic women, they're just kind of a mess. She said, oh, I thought it was all the drinking.
Oh, that was nice.
That was very funny, but it's not the drinking.
And And I wanted to add just to what you were saying earlier as well, how they tend to generalize in groups with religions, and it's the integralism thing. And again, one of these bros recently posted and said the Protestant is indifferent to blasphemy, but is mortified by cursing. I really like the guy, but I'm not going to name their name. But it's kind of like, but again, it's like, what are you talking about? I don't like blasphemy. When someone blasphemes, generally, if I'm with them, like I don't like cursing or blasphemy. So again, like what? Again, you're lumping.
We can't curse or swear. It's vulgarity that you don't like. We're allowed to use vulgarity, but we're not allowed to curse or swear. But it's scandalous because vulgarity sound like they call it cursing. Cursing is damning someone to hell. Swearing.
Well, I mean, I consider like blasphemy is bad. Using bad words is bad.
Yeah.
And so, but again, just this sort of carnal.
Yeah, it's minor
fighting.
Stuff. Yeah.
But,
why do it? Why bother?
Before Blackouts, India, I think.
Yeah.
Jump in, right? The window's closing. Jump in.
Because did you want to move on to Blackouts?
I want to see the picture of the Pope.
No. If you've got.
I have. But I just want. I thought we mentioned this as well. This was interesting. Eric. To get him on the podcast. It's a rumor, but they just opened in Hong Kong. I think China did a gold vault. I think a vault or an exchange. And then there's this rumor that in Saudi Arabia they're going to open a vault. So that was the problem with Saudi and China, that there was not this assurance. Like if they were going to use gold for yuan, but the gold is in China, well, Saudi, anything could happen. And so there's this rumor now that in Saudi, they're going to have vaults for the gold that can be then used for the exchanges with yuan. That's a rumor. But just India, just real quick, if you guys have any thoughts on India, my main point here without going into too many details, I said this like a week ago, and then Pippa Malmgren, there's a key quote I've extracted from, she's an insider, but she says we have to ask the simple question, how much of the problem between India and Pakistan, and maybe even with China, has been fueled by American activities? We have to ask, how is it possible the American government funded the very terrorist opponents it was supposedly trying to shut down? And then I've shared this guy, maybe you've seen in the Pakistan defense minister, saying, for 3 decades, we supported, trained, and funded terrorist groups for the West, including US and UK. And basically my theory on India, Pakistan is like the US deep state came in, did the terror attack. It wasn't Pakistan or India. And now they got them fighting at each other.
And they're going to sell them arms. Totally agree. Totally agree. And Vance was just there. Like, I'm thinking he may be the new John McCain. He goes to the Vatican, the Pope dies, he goes to India, starts a war. I really think he's the little snake in the grass.
There is a lot going off in the world right now, though. I think that's really, if we zoom out just beyond even the India-Pakistan and just say all the things that we're discussing, these are huge things. It is really the breakdown of the old system. And it feels like America is in the driving seat of building a new system, but it's based around chaos. It's a chaos because we're in the transition period. So I think it's almost like a global hybrid wars taking place. And I think it's going to get worse from here. Yeah. And the India-Pakistan, I've got really, it's not a conflict that I've studied. I know they've had lots and lots of issues in the past, but I'm not surprised it's flaring up at this point. Yeah, I'm not surprised. Okay, guys, shall we talk about Spain and Portugal? I mean, I don't want to go through this too much. I made a video on my channel about it, giving my thoughts. So I'm going to actually hand it over to you guys. What were your thoughts on what happened? Did you buy the narrative that it was around renewables, or do you feel there's something else going on?
I had some thoughts that it kind of fits that pattern of overcreate demand, and then pull it away and maybe repurpose it or automate. So this is what went with my idea with Hervoye, where we both kind of thought Bitcoin. I have a friend who says that the purpose of a machine or a system is what it does. And I'm like, well, Bitcoin is a giant energy consuming machine. So it's just an energy consumption machine. So between Bitcoin and fostering green energy and taking fossil fuels and nukes offline, they have maximized alternate energy. And now if they can demonize it, so in this country, they're no longer subsidizing EVs for whatever reason. And actually, one of the things Vance was saying they wanted to sell India was those mini nuclear generators for their AI programs. So I think this is part of a discrediting of the green stuff so that you can bring back the fossil fuels, bring back the energy, the nuclear energy, and have enough to implement AI, which we don't need. That's obviously a top-down thing, the AI. So I think that's just part of that pattern.
Well,
But do you think that Spain and Portugal did it unto themselves, or that it was done by somebody else? Like, who do you think was responsible for it?
That I don't know. I mean, it could be inherent in the system. Like, that's the kind of thing I think about the wildfires. I feel like, well, if you just don't treat it correctly, like if maybe it's undermined. Certainly people get bribed to like not do things right. I think it could be as easy as that. I'm not sure any single human being would have to pull the plug on it to just make it inevitable. Although the timing was crazy that it was right after the guy was like, hey, we're celebrating our 100% greenness.
I think that was kind of funny. Yeah, it was.
I think I still think their goal, it's not to bring back nuclear, it's to give us, the plebes, wind, intermittent wind,
right,
and solar, and then they're going to bring the whatever small modular reactors, nuclear, coal, hydrocarbon for themselves. And then we'll just live with like dystopian Kafkaesque fashion with the lights going on and off. But just real quick, I was going to share.
But the AI technosphere will have a constant stream of energy.
Oh yeah, for them. But again, we just got to go back a month. Like to answer Mike's question, it was. I think the globalists in Brussels and with their minions in Spain, they pulled the plug completely. I think they just pulled the plug, because how do you have a month ago say, prepare a 72-hour crisis kit for EU citizens? And like they knew, because we're going to pull the plug on you. And then, nothing, here's a meme, nothing says net zero like blackouts across 4 major countries, World Economic Forum, net zero. But this article, it's from Spanish papers in Spanish. Here's the auto translation. The city of 15-minute cities as a solution to avoid collapses like those from last Monday's blackout.
Okay, it was definitely
anything happens.
A little bit opportunity.
False flag operation.
Purpose.
False flag operation. Anything is a false flag by default. But like they're literally saying, we had these blackouts. The solution is 15-minute cities. It's like it's like clear that they said, we're going to pull the plug, problem, reaction, solution, and then 15-minute cities. Like this is the place. Like everywhere it's happening here in Mexico, it's absolute insanity. And I don't know. What do you guys think?
I think there's like, as always, there's about 5 different angles you can look at this one from. I immediately looked at the geostrategic importance of it, because Spain has the most LNG terminals in Europe by a long way. They've got about 7 and the nearest is 4. So they're very strategically important for LNG imports. And of course, Nord Stream got blown up so that the US could sell Europe LNG.
Yes.
So then you had Spain. When all of these tariffs got put on, Spain is moving very close to China. They have been for about a decade. So is Portugal. Portugal is one of the key parts of the Belt and Road Initiative, which we did an interview about, Monica, on your show a while back. So Spain and Portugal basically said to the US, well, we don't care about the tariffs because we are energy independent, not just because of the renewables, but because they're not actually really integrated with the European grid, which is breaking apart because of Nord Stream, but and particularly because of Spain and the amount of LNG terminals. So let me just give you the timeline. On the 9th of April, Scott Bessent said to a news reporter, Spain siding too closely with Beijing will be like cutting their own throat. A day later, President Sanchez of Spain meets with Xi Jinping, flies straight out to China, has bilateral agreements signed during that meeting, and does a public announcement saying we're going to move closer. He returns to Spain on the 12th. 2 weeks later, massive power outage. I don't know. That's another narrative that you could go with. But as always, there's about 10 narratives we could go with. So I do think it could be related to Europe's LNG, because if you think about it this way, if Spain moves closer to China and they have all of the most strategic LNG ports, what's the rest of Europe going to do? They are going to probably be more inclined to move towards to China too. So America really does need Spain and Portugal to move towards it. That was my take. So I'll throw that.
I'm just looking and seeing if J.D. Vance went to Spain.
Well, there's the meme you saw where, I mean, he goes to the Pope dies. I saw some article, I don't know if it's true, but that like after he shook the Pope's hand, the Pope like looked at his hand and felt weird or something.
Are you allowed to shake the Pope's hand?
I think they should.
This guy converted to Catholicism. You have to kiss his ring.
And then he goes to India.
I don't care about that stuff, but that just seems weird.
Yeah, I think it could be both narratives. What we just said, Mike. And speaking of the Pope, there he is. There is the man. And like the White House actually tweeted out the AI Trump as Pope. But then, he gave
that could be offensive. Yeah, I mean, I
don't
give a care.
I don't think it's becoming in the world of diplomacy. I don't think it's.
Yes, but he's like
it's kind of sad to see America that, America, which is supposed to be the home of freedom and liberty, that this is where we've got to. It's wild, actually. I think it's kind of sad.
Live here. I mean, it's really crazy. And it makes, so the biggest problem, I think, is Trump derangement syndrome, because people take this really seriously and they're so humiliated to be Americans. And I'm like, that's not him. It's this is a humiliation ritual. Like, we are being humiliated. It's like we're a conquered country. You know what I mean? Or young girls are running around like half naked and, this kind of stuff. But as long as 40 million people think that it's him personally, then you're just going to flip over the other side. Everybody thought it was Obama personally, like that. It's just never going to end. It's outrageous. And we're just circling the drain with every, pendulum swing. It's a mixed metaphor.
I mean, on one hand, it's funny to be able to make fun like that, but for the White House to tweet it, I think that
I agree.
If those are out there, people have made them and they're out there.
Or even if it was him on Truth Social, but for the White House to tweet it, which is pretty official, that's gross. Yeah.
I like Donnie Discern's comment. Every time Trump does something blatantly Antichrist-like, people say he's just trolling. That's the cover. And my point this week,
good point.
Again, I pick out the signals that inform a pattern. And it'd be like, okay, so it's like, okay, we got this Trump. And then there was more, right? He gave an interview to The Atlantic where he said, this is an actual quote, "I run the country and the world." So it's like, okay, it's a Trump AI photo. He's tweeting out. Then he says he runs the world. Someone created this AI, but he says, "I would like to be Pope." Who'd like to?
Pope? I'd like to be Pope. That would be my number one choice. No, I don't know. I have no preference.
Okay, but then there's that.
Yeah, but you say that.
I don't know if you get. Yeah, but then there's there's more. Well, there's this AI someone created.
Wow.
Alex Jones says this is an excellent documentary.
Yes, that is going to.
Robert De Niro's crying at the feet of the Pope, Pope Trump.
You're killing me, boy. You're killing me.
But wait.
What about Elon with his son making the sign that like with his hands outstretched at the narthex of a church? Remember in the beginning, right after the. Oh, you didn't see that one?
No, but I mean,
I'm seeing what you're saying now.
But it's like Trump is flying on a massive eagle as Pope, and he's like our savior. But I'm sorry, that's like literally Antichrist stuff. And myself, as a non-denominational biblical Christian, I consider the Pope itself as an Antichrist. But wait, there's more. Then
every Pope is the Antichrist.
Just that idea of the Pope papacy is like in place of Christ. It's like a false Christ. But then you have, I caught this on the telegrams. It says Syrian government supporters are now posting things on Twitter indirectly comparing al-Jolani, Syria's president, to Allah. So it's like, wait, Trump as Pope, Jolani as Allah. And then to top it off, cherry on top, some guy called Abdullah Hashem of the Ahmadi religion of peace and light, he comes out and says he's the Christ to the Christians. He's the Mahdi to the Muslims. He's got St. Peter's blood. He's got Muhammad's blood. Like what? Like, okay,
Yeah,
can you see a pattern forming here? Just in 1 week, Trump Pope, Jolani Allah, and then here's the Messiah.
I am Abdullah, the successor of Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam, the successor of the Comforter Ahmed, the successor of Simon Peter, the successor of Muhammad, the successor of Jesus Christ.
Yeah. I don't even feel like I'm allowed to listen to that.
I am the
because
proof
it's so
upon the
blasphemous.
Christians.
I would
am
never
the son
play
of the
that.
Muslims through my father, and the son of the Christians and the Jews through my mother. I am the son of the East through my father, and the son of the West through my mother. I am like Zulkarnain, who with one horn in the East and one in the West. And I am the inheritor of all that lies between. I am more knowledgeable than any false pope, and I am appointed by name and the will of the prophets. My name is also on the tongue
Yeah,
of
I give it, what, 5 years before we find out that he was diddling all of his cult members.
Yeah.
That's what always happens.
Well, I
with
mean,
these
look,
people.
it's far out. Like if you look towards the end, there's the full clip.
I mean,
So weird.
light,
the paper.
And
peace and light, that's very...
It's like that NvidX cult where, who was it? Alison Mack, who was branding women, and it was like a big sex cult.
Oh, yeah. That was the, wasn't that the Seagram people?
The one from Smallville, I know she was a part of it, and then there was actually, I was reading up on that recently, just to hijack, but it was a Hungarian princess was actually somebody that was part of royal bloodstock was a part of that cult too. So yeah, they managed to get to the
Bronfman, was it Claire Bronfman, the Seagram's heiress, the Nexium cult? Is that what you're talking about?
Yes. Yeah, but I think we're going to see a lot more of this as we get towards the unraveling of the world. I think we're living through a great unwind, and I think we can all kind of agree on that all of the structures, all of the assumptions we had on how the world works are falling apart, and we're going to see people become increasingly desperate and move towards these crazy cults and believe people like that weirdo, and also to become more radicalized in their own religions. And the idolatry is what we're going to see. Idolatry is going to be everywhere. And, if you are a Christian, you need to take a step back from this craziness and just, I always retreat inwards. This is what I like to do is just, I don't want to be a part of any of that stuff. I just retreat inwards. I can think what I want, and I don't police what anyone else thinks. If you think something
you
different.
are responsible for your own soul. So
Exactly.
preserve it as you can. Cut off your eyeballs or whatever if you have to.
it could be the unwind, like the final unwind, the end times, and because I mean, look what's
one.
I mean, I'm serious. Like, I'm not going to be standing waiting for the end. Like one of my past, it's just again, you're going to go on living on, making some preparations and being balanced. But it's like, no, I mean, I honestly wouldn't be surprised if like Christ comes in the 2030s. So.
I've done a ton of episodes on end times for my podcast, and I'm planting food, I'm growing stuff, I'm harvesting. I think we're heading towards something big, and maybe it's end times, but even if it's not, I think we're going to see like cataclysm of some sort, and the old world is gone, in my opinion. So it's time to just prepare for at least a decade. I think we're going to have some serious issues.
Did you see the successor of the name of the successor of Warren Buffett?
Yes, it was the vice president. I can't remember his name.
His name is Abel. His last name is Abel, Abel. So it was a little biblical, but also I just thought it was kind of symbolic for like, he is like, we've been talking about the successor of Warren Buffett for decades. Who would be able to fill his shoes? And there you have the guy, but it also has a little bit of biblical because he was murdered.
We have to calculate the gematria on that.
I don't like that stuff. I don't like that stuff. But I think nominative determinism is kind of fun sometimes. Like who is destined to be the guy because his name was that. Maybe it's not even his real name. People change their names.
But just what Mike was saying, to quote that freak Antonio Gramsci, the old world is dying and the new world struggles to be born. Now is the time of monsters.
Did you see that article about Gramsci is like the philosophical godfather of the Republicans or something crazy like that? Yeah, really weird. It was an article. I don't know if it was in the Journal. I know Courtney Turner picked up on it, and I think she's going to do like a show on it. But yeah, it was pretty shocking. I'll see if I can find the link. And I would love the link to the thing about the 15-minute cities.
I already posted it on my Twitter. Yeah.
Okay, I'll get it on your Twitter feed. I have the Gramsci thing is on my Twitter feed too.
Well, yeah. Any other? I think we covered.
Yeah, MAGA's Favorite Communist is the name of it.
The only thing on my list that we didn't cover was Virginia Guthrie.
Oh, yeah,
We
I have
never
that
got the
too.
Epstein files. We never got the files, unfortunately. We did get some pantomime files, but we do have one of the key witnesses of what went on over there who's sadly departed. So, Monica, what did you think of that one?
It's kind of weird because I feel like some of these things are like psyops within psyops. And one thing that came out immediately was people were saying, well, not only did she not commit suicide, she's not even really dead. And I thought that about McAfee. I thought about that about Epstein. I've thought the other side where Jahar Tsarnaev and Ghislaine Maxwell are dead. They're not alive. It just seemed like a psyop within a psyop. And I find it just so blatant. I just don't know the answer, but I think it's the beginning of a new kind of, you so don't know what to believe that even within the alt media goes like one level too far. And maybe think she's not even dead.
This was one of those ones that was completely irrelevant to me. I don't take any notice of these things. The Epstein stuff, it's like, it's not important to me. I understand that we're never going to see anything that resembles truth around it, so I'm not going to waste my time following all of these rabbit holes. It's sad that a person died was as far as I went with that.
Yeah, I feel exactly the same, Mike, because
if that did, sorry to interrupt, but if that did in fact happen, just to respect what you said, Monica, yeah, we don't know.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the biggest focus again is I think it's the world state that's coming into being. It's like they're putting us in these prisons and the 15-minute cities. It's like, there's that thing that went on with Epstein and those people and, this satanic cult here and that. And it's like, yeah, those are important stuff. And I just deflect to people who are more expert in that. I'm stretched in terms of my bandwidth and, go read Whitney Webb's book or whoever, yeah. And I thought I mentioned, because you mentioned, I want to read the MAGA communist article you're talking about, Christopher Rufo. But that made me think of the woke right that James Lindsay talks about. It's like, look, Lindsay has some of his faults. And he was on Jordan Peterson, and I don't like Jordan Peterson. But it's kind of like a lot of these individuals, they have a core insight that is original that no one else has developed.
They wouldn't exist if they didn't.
Right. And it's like Lindsay is right on the woke right thing. And it's like, I used this recently, the Israel and the Nazis. It's like, look, I don't mind the state of Israel. What they're doing is insane. Just flat out murdering an entire group of people, taking their lands, expanding. Okay, so it's like, can we have this nuance? It's like, okay, I'm for an Israeli state. I'm not for them wiping out the Palestinians, since like they're drone bombing them, building these digital prisons. Okay, that's bad. But at the same time, James Lindsay just pointed out, you had the woke left, which was pushing trans and all that woke stuff. And now you have this woke right promoting Nazism, neo-Nazism. Like it's a real thing. And I'm seeing people that I actually know personally, promoting National Socialism, and Hitler was a good guy. And it's like,
that is a total psyop.
Can't both be wrong?
Like,
can't we have Israel, Zionism bad?
Yeah.
And the neo-Nazism
Yeah, it taints
bad.
the anti-war movement. It taints the anti-war movement. So does putting on the pro-Palestinian protesters in the commie, woke, left, anti-colonialist basket, which he did October 8th. That his first focus wasn't that. How did this so-called terrorist attack actually happen? No, it was communists are against this because they're anti-colonial and everybody's a communist who's anti-colonial, whatever. I mean, I don't want to generalize what he's saying, but the message is you can taint the anti-war people on both sides by putting them in those woke left, right baskets when it's a completely, what you said, totally valid, rational thing. You cannot steal or kill. Like, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not kill, and we can all get on the same page and evaluate specific things. And it has nothing to do with the U.S. We shouldn't pay for it. You can denounce it individually. We should not be involved in that stuff at all, and it would actually just go away. But they taint any discussion of it by making both anybody who objects to it in one of the crazy baskets.
And nuance is not popular. Like I've said this before. Like if you're on the right or the left, you're gonna get boosted. But then if you're kind of like, well, no, and then no one wants to listen to it.
Well, this is where cognitive dissidents came from, right?
Yeah.
It was nuance. We started this in nuance because none of us were willing to say, kill all of these people, the Jews, or, none of us were willing to say, no, Donald Trump's the savior. And nobody liked you for it at the time. But actually, over time, people start to see that nuance. It's usually just after the fact.
Don't you both agree, or do you? I don't want to put words in your mouth, that that stuff is pushed down from the top, like that radical, irrational, emotion-driven stuff that taps into people's frustrations or disappointments is pushed down from the top?
Anytime you're in that state, you are being controlled, full stop. If you adopt a massive, a mainstream opinion, whether it's on the left or the right or in the so-called alternative media, anytime you adopt that, point for point, you have been fed that, because that's not reality. Reality is nuance. Reality is saying, okay, I can see that perspective. What they're doing is wrong, but I also know this perspective, and it's going through it. But it takes work. It takes work to actually truly think and to empathize with different situations. So most people don't want to do it. And also, I think that they've created this world through Hollywood. They've created a meme-type world where we all just devolve to this really lazy thinking. So I never do that. And oftentimes it does mean you get ostracized. And I think the reason why channels like yours twos don't get pushed is because of that, because they can't box you in. When you're boxed in, you can get 100, 200,000 views easily because, you're a known quantity is what I think it is. But actually what they're really worried about is that they put something out there and you just point the finger at it and say, no, I can show you the man behind the curtain here. They don't want that to happen.
But just to your question, I think it's a bit of both, that it is from the top. They're constantly trying to radicalize, but also there's fertile ground as well. And just on Zionism, I was on Richard Grove's Grand Theft World not recently, and we were talking about Richard Wurmbrand because he was in the mini doc that T. Snyder made, and Richard Wurmbrand was this. Someone called him, I think Grove mistakenly, or Scott called him a Catholic. No, he was a Protestant pastor, 14 years in the Romanian communist prison. And he wrote "Torture for Christ" and many other books, and he founded Voice of the Martyrs and Marx and Satan. He wrote a book, and like Richard Grove is just insane. Like he just pulls out Marx and Satan. He had it. It was highlighted, and then he goes directly. Like I haven't read the book in its entirety, but
he's a savant.
But and so Wurmbrand actually spoke about two types of Zionism, and this is kind of important, I think. And so he highlights this Hess guy who was one of these like atheist Zionist promoters in the 1800s, and so you have, I think, this bad Zionism that we're seeing now. And this is the thing where I think a lot of people throw the baby out with the bathwater and like, Zionism bad, Jews are evil, Christianity is fake, false. And I'm like, no, wait a minute. It's kind of like what we're seeing carried out now, where these Israelites in Israel, who many are atheists or occultists, or they've rejected Christ, they're carrying out mass murder. That's bad Zionism. But Wurmbrand talks about a good, like neighborly, loving Zionism. So you could have this aspiration for like a Jewish state, and it's a loving Zionism where it's like, hey, we want to help, you Palestinians. We're not going to bomb. We're going to bomb you with love.
Just follow the Ten Commandments.
Exactly.
That's
that good Zionism.
There's nothing wrong. Yeah, everybody has to do that. Everybody.
But this the standard. This could be any nation or any set of people could be radicalized, and in one generation. you could be radical. Like, look at Germany, for example. Let's say during fascism, you had an entire generation radicalized. Does that mean that we throw out Germany entirely? Germany should never exist. The whole of German history must be thrown out. Germany never did anything right. No, but that's what people are doing now in terms of Israel. So again, it's just a non-nuanced take. Okay, there's a lot of people over there who may be radicalized and believe that wiping out Palestinians is a great thing. And we're going to see that in the media, but that doesn't mean everyone thinks that. And it doesn't mean that everything Israel has ever done is incorrect and wrong, and that Israel, period, should not exist. So like you, Havoy, I've got nothing wrong with Israel per se as like a nation. I can have opinions on it without, necessarily going one way or the other. I just think, I'm just tired of all of the, I don't know what the right word is, but I'm tired of people kind of forcing everyone to become an expert and have a really strong opinion on something. I actually don't think we should have an extremely strong opinion on everything. I think some things you just need to say, I really don't know yet.
I don't live there. I don't know. I didn't get my land taken, or I didn't, I don't know. There's almost nothing I barely know what the right answer is for my insane community right now. I don't know if I showed you guys the videos of it starts before dawn, the dump trucks back and forth in front of my house, and people protest them because they don't want this, all that mud. They constantly, and I'm like, it'll be done by September 1st. So I'm like, don't stop protesting, please. Let them finish, even though my house, I'm the only one up here practically on this awful road. But it's hard to really know the answer in your own space. So I do think everyone is responsible for the 10 Commandments and for the moral life. And if you see a wrong, you should speak out against it, and certainly shouldn't remain silent and imply consent to it. But it's difficult, and we are forced into these baskets, and it's really bad, because once that basket exists and you're in it, they can start shoveling stuff in there. And then you've got then you're guilty by association. It takes a lot of courage to get out of that, especially if you build your identity and your community around it through the birds of the feather stuff like TikTok and everything. It's set up for this. It takes a lot of courage and discipline to inform your conscience, to consult your conscience, and to follow your conscience in a mature and responsible way. It takes a lot of courage. So just
very well said. Very well said. And the alternative media, we are now kind of in this, it's like a big business thing, and everyone's expected to have an immediate response and an immediate opinion, and it should align with the other people in the alternative media. And actually, no, I might want to go away and read books for a year on this subject to figure it out. Like you brought up India, Pakistan earlier, Havoy. It's like, what kind of opinion can I give on that? I've not studied it enough. So that's what I really like about you two. That's why we came together for this, is because we don't immediately jump to conclusions. And I've always enjoyed both of your shows because of that. And I'm going to end it there for me. I've got nothing else to add, my friends. So that's it for Parallel Mike. You can find me on Parallel Systems Broadcast. On Substack, actually, is the best place to find me, Parallel Systems. And and Parallel Mike Podcast as well.
Thank you, Mike. And I love both of y'all's feeds on Substack. I'm on Substack too. I'm a little distracted at the moment. I post a couple of times a week, but I'll be back blazing. But between the two of you, I get so much information that I know I can trust it. So I appreciate all that you do. But I do plenty of shows, so you can check me out on the Monica Perez Show pretty much everywhere you listen to podcasts, also on Substack. And I tweet a lot, although unless you actually go to @Monica Perez Show, you will never, ever get one of my tweets in your feed. I am totally shadow banned, but that's okay. It gives me a place to keep my notes.
Yes, and check out geopoliticsandempire.com, geopoliticsandempire.substack.com, and consider becoming a supporter of one of our shows, two of our three shows, or heck, all three of our shows, because we also do the monthly live recorded Q&A with subscribers, so that we do fun stuff.
And if you're lucky, I might turn up about an hour into that, so get 10 minutes of me.
Can't tell time in Poland. That's my favorite hour or hour and a half. Like I think that's the best kind of whatever roundtable thing, Zoom thing that I've ever been involved in. It's really,
I will say, listeners, it's a fantastic community that's grown up around that kind of merging of three shows, and all of our audiences join. And if you are looking for community, if you are looking to just have a really relaxed conversation with no need to have a strong opinion, just discussing things, that's the place to find it. So join Havoy's, mine, or Monica's Substack. In fact, I'm going to be an honorable one. I'm going to step aside, join Monica's or Havoy's, and then
do
come
Havoy.
see
Let's drive people to Havoy. He's got. How many kids do you have?
2. We should. Hey, I just thought of this. We should offer like. I don't know if there's. I don't know if there's a way to do this. We'd have to figure this out. I'm not sure if there's a way to do this, but where you get like a 3.
Oh no, there is, right? Okay.
That's a great idea.
If you join 2, the third person can give a year's for free, and we could do that. Yeah. So whichever 2 you really want to join, then the other one will hook you.
I'll do it. You can have mine.
Are you in?
If you join those 2, you can have mine free.
We have to find a way to verify that. But yeah, we should work on
Yeah, we can. No, maybe just give us the email addresses. Yeah.
But what about for existing people that are already joined? We might have screwed ourselves up there, guys.
That's all right. I'll still do it.
Let's not throw anything out there.
I don't
for certain. I'll just say if people have ideas, they can let us know.
I'm not the breadwinner at the moment, so we'll wait until
we are all scratching in the dirt here just to get by. I'm not gonna lie.
Yes, but it's super fun with you guys. I love that. And yes, so I look forward to that, which should be in about 2 weeks.
Awesome. Well, I look forward to it. Thanks so much, listeners, for joining us once again. And I look forward to seeing you two in the roundtable.